Hello, my name is Kristyn Rohrer, and I'm going to give you a little behind-the-scenes tour of my show that is up at Baltimore Playworks right now. So the show is called Conscientious Objectification, which is a bit of a play on words. I wanted to kind of lean into the term conscientious objector as something that comes kind of, at least from my side, from like a Mennonite experience and relating to that and kind of this current political landscape we're in, trying to digest everything that's going on in the world and through my own worldview. But also kind of playing into the side of object and ceramic object and bringing certain themes and ideas and concepts into a conversation through object. So that's a lot about, I guess, why I chose this title and what the show is about. But it's been, quite a few years of kind of building up this body of work. Most of the things in the show I've made in the past 10 months since I moved to Baltimore. But there's a few pieces as we walk around I might point out that are a little bit from my past that I kind of brought back in. But I will start a little bit by just talking about this piece here in the front of the show. It's called Trans Barn Raising, and that kind of comes from, one, the colors of the piece are reflective of the trans flag, and then the term barn raising is actually a quilting term. It comes from the certain quilt block pattern that I drew inspiration from. So it's actually this, it's called the log cabin quilt pattern, and then once you arrange it in a certain orientation to kind of create this like larger diamond within diamonds, they call that barn raising. So it was kind of born out of, thinking a lot about, a lot of things that are happening politically right now and really the importance of advocating for the trans community, and especially as something that maybe seems really countercultural to a religious experience or relating to something, kind of quilting, Mennonite, these things that to me were always a little bit tied to church and family and some of those things that feel a little complicated, but can kind of come together to create something really interesting and beautiful. I also get a lot of inspiration just like aesthetically from Islamic architecture. So I think a lot of this piece, actually the kind of vision for it came from seeing a lot of mosques and shrines as I was traveling in the Middle East. So I really like to bring, kind of thinking about the art that I really love to see in the world, and that's really impactful for me. I wanted to create something that was reminiscent of that or made me feel what I like to feel when I see those pieces, but make it my own. So that's kind of the inspiration behind this one. So this piece is called How Can I Keep From Singing? It's actually a piece that I made a few years ago when I was still in West Virginia. I did a post-baccalaureate program at WVU, and for my final critique, I made this piece. And this kind of got born out of a family conversation that I had with my parents. I was doing this project where I kind of was reflecting on, I asked them to write prompts about their lives and kind of family stories. And it brought up this interesting family story that my dad told me about when he was a little kid in church. And his family was really into singing. But it was kind of it was the 60s, so it was when, radio was becoming popular, and it was kind of a big music boom, but like the Mennonite community was really afraid of that. They, kind of this technological side and this side of like showcasing yourself and like singing out was really frowned upon. So my dad kind of talked about this story with our family and this quartet, and a really interesting kind of conversation came up about kind of community and pride and gender in the Mennonite community. So I recorded this conversation with my parents and made these objects to kind of relate to that story. And even though I made this piece quite a few years ago, I think it was 2022, I really wanted to bring it back for this show because my parents got to come to the opening, and it was really cool to see my parents listen to a conversation that we had. And kind of reflect on that together. So you get a little taste into my family dynamics if you get to listen to this piece. So this piece is called What Are You Waiting For? It actually evolved over a couple months of time. Sometimes I like to make a sculpture in my studio and kind of keep it alive for a while. So this is when I started in, I want to say October, and it probably took me till December to actually finish it. Just because I kind of started the form, and it started as one thing, and I wasn't really seeing the vision. I didn't kind of like how it was turning out, but I just kind of waited and like let it take the space that it needed to. And then once I was kind of in the right headspace and came back to it, I was like, okay, I know exactly what I want to do with this. So it was really fun to kind of bring in, this is where I started actually getting more into piping clay, which is a technique I learned from my mom, who is a cake decorator. So all these kind of fine details of the dress were piped by hand. And my favorite part of this piece is the little tiny purse that my hand is holding, which I use nichrome wire to kind of create the purse strings and just pipe clay onto it. But yeah, that was a really fun piece to make, to just kind of practice a new skill and kind of challenge myself a little bit. So this piece is called OK Dyke, which is a piece that also took me quite a few months to make. I wanted to really challenge myself to make a large hand sculpture, so this is the largest one that I've made, but I really wanted to kind of take my time with it and really build it out. The title, actually, I got the idea from a podcast that I listened to called the Handsome Podcast, which is 3 queer comedians, and they kind of just talk about life and things, and one of the comedians, Tig Notaro, talks about a story of kind of how they got together with her wife, and part of the story involves Tig calling her not yet wife a dyke, and so it was kind of just this like funny play on just like thinking about the word dyke and like who can say it and in what ways can we say it. As you know, a queer person, I ask myself those questions too. So it was interesting to kind of try to like reclaim that and like characterize a hand within this kind of conversation. So part of the fun of this piece is that this hat actually comes off. And so there's a little rainbow on the inside, so a little surprise if you get to see it, but I'm the only one who's allowed to take the hat off, so don't try it yourself. This piece is called No Purpling. It is one that I actually started before I moved to Baltimore and finished when I moved here. But this phrase no purpling is something that came up actually a lot when I was at church camp. So I'd go to camp a lot of summers, and their rule, they always said, boys are blue and girls are red, and we weren't allowed to purple. So that's always just something kind of silly that like stuck with me a little bit. But it was really funny. I had a couple friends who came to visit from back home from church. And so they came to visit the show, and they saw this piece and they read the title and they instantly started laughing because they knew exactly what I was talking about. So it was kind of fun to see their reactions. But this was probably one of the hardest pieces to install in this show. It took me pretty much a full day to hang them myself and just kind of create the angles and the tension that I wanted to come through with the piece to create this very puppeteer feeling. So I hope that comes through. So this room is where things get a bit political. So I wanted to start by talking about the piece on the wall here. It's called The Fall of USAID. And this is actually a piece that I made earlier this year. I imagine many of you might not know, but I actually used to work as a USAID contractor. So for the past 5 years, before I moved here, I was working in international development, and I was basically designing and managing teams to design projects all over the world for, things from gender-based violence prevention to conflict and stability, resilience programming, local governance. But my company also did, health projects and just kind of getting people basic medicine and food and promoting agriculture. So it was really shocking and pretty scary when USAID fell, essentially. So kind of since the executive order that the Trump administration signed at the beginning of his term, USAID crumbled in a matter of 12 days. So in that amount of time, pretty much everyone that I had worked with for the past 5 years had lost their jobs, myself included. And this piece was really a reflection on that time and kind of feelings of questioning what is a civil servant? What is our purpose? As someone who wasn't even a federal employee, I really wondered that. I never thought of myself as a civil servant until that happened. And so this was really mostly just for myself to reflect on that time and kind of write and express something out of that. And also just call attention to kind of the, scary part of how a government can centralize power. And that USAID was really the kind of first domino that we saw falling. But I have this piece here, and then I also actually brought out this piece, which is mostly a protest sign that in the couple of days after we got the news about USAID closing, we, including myself and some former coworkers, went down to DC to protest, and I do have to admit, it was probably the most depressing protest I've been to, but it was really cathartic to be with my coworkers and to kind of express these things together and really just to kind of stand in that space and support each other through that time. So I kind of wanted to show that. Actually, a friend of mine who went to that protest with me got to come to my show opening, so we kind of got to stand next to it together and smile, even though all of these things are happening around us. But those are kind of a bit of a bridge into some of the other pieces I have here, which are really talking a lot about Palestine and the current genocide that's going on there now. As someone who's worked in international development for 5 years, I got the chance to help design a program in Palestine, supporting small businesses. I also got the chance to work with Palestinian refugees. When I was in college, I did an internship in Jordan and got to live with a Palestinian family and work with a lot of refugees. So I really kind of have a bit of a personal stake in a different way than I think maybe a lot of people in the US have gotten to experience. But I don't take that lightly, and I also know that I am not Palestinian, I'm also not Jewish, so I'm kind of entering this conversation from my own perspective, just as someone who has worked with a lot of Palestinian refugees. But this piece specifically is called Send Food, Not Bombs. And really aesthetically it was inspired by a group called Mennonite Action that formed after October 7th. And is really advocating for an end to the genocide and fewer restrictions on just getting aid into the country and being able to feed people who are currently facing malnutrition and in some cases famine. So that really was inspired by this group that I really never thought would have existed. You know, a Mennonite group that was advocating for a free Palestine was really inspiring to me. I also wanted to pay attention to these cups here. A lot of them, I call them my Free Palestine cups. Some of them have the, keffiyeh patterning from traditional Palestinian head wrapping. But I actually will be selling these pieces independently after the closing of this show to raise money for both humanitarian aid in Gaza and advocacy for a free Palestine. So that would include, groups like Mennonite Central Committee, would also include groups like Jewish Voice for Peace and Adallah. So keep your eyes out for that if you're interested in both supporting and getting one of these beautiful cups. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about this piece. It's called Gaza, an Open Air Prison. I actually made this piece in 2018, which was quite a few years ago. It was actually right after I got back from Jordan, where I was interning and living with Palestinians. And even at that time, 2018, before October 7th ever happened, people were calling Gaza an open-air prison. The World Health Organization was stating that by 2050, Gaza would be uninhabitable. So I really thought a lot about this piece when I was kind of bringing this show together, and I knew that it was just sitting in my parents' basement. And even though it's a few years old, I really thought that it would be important to bring this piece back out and to show people, and to kind of just call attention to the fact that, a lot of people have only entered the conversation about Israel and Palestine, on October 8th. But it's really not a conversation that started then. It started so much longer ago than that, 50, 75 years even. So to just kind of bring a piece out that kind of calls to that, and to show that, this has been a long struggle, and is more a conversation about systemic oppression than anything else. So I wanted to talk a little bit about these oval pieces on the wall, mostly because they were actually some of the most fun pieces for me to make in this show. They were really some of the earliest pieces that I made once I moved to Baltimore, and I gave myself, a couple months. I started here in September for my residency, and so I kind of gave myself to the end of the year to just play and to just make things without really thinking about it would be for my show or who the audience would be or what the kind of, if there was a message behind it. I just wanted to make something, to make a beautiful object. And so that's really where these kind of came out of. And I also really enjoyed experimenting with doing some more cake decorating techniques in these pieces. So all of these kind of dots are hand piped, like icing would be. So it was really fun for me to kind of play with carving and piping and layering in this different way that I hadn't done before. And it really made me a little bit nostalgic for the times that I got to work with my mom in her bakery. And so it kind of brought me back to those times a little bit. So this is a plate installation that's inspired by the genderqueer flag. So I was really kind of drawing from those purples and lavenders and greens to try to create this kind of quilted looking pattern. And I wanted to, again, kind of similar to the piece that I had out front, the trans barn raising piece, to kind of create something that was, multiple objects coming together into one larger piece, and to kind of just be representative of kind of a collective in that way, something that gets stronger when you bring more together. And these pieces actually also, similar to the Free Palestine cups, these pieces will be for sale independently after the show closing, and we'll actually be raising money for organizations in Baltimore that are supporting the trans and LGBTQ+ community. So that will likely include Baltimore Safe Haven and maybe a couple others. But if you're interested in supporting the trans community and queer community in Baltimore, or just interested in these plates, you can definitely check out my Instagram and get on my email list, and I'll be sending information about that not too long from now. Well, thank you for tuning in to this kind of virtual tour of my show. It's really been, this work is really personal to me. It's been, quite a few years in the making, even if most of the work came from the past 10 months. So it's been really exciting to be able to share it with people, for people to come and to really be moved by the work and to connect with it themselves in whatever way they can. So if you get the chance to come by, the show will be up through August 23rd. And if you do, come say hi. I'm always happy to chat and talk more about the work. There's lots of writing up, so feel free to check that out while you're here. And thank you for coming, and thank you for supporting me and my work and Baltimore Clayworks.